no slides here. You're going to get the straight skivvy here from Dr. LeBoeuf. We first met about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's back in Nam, yeah.
Yeah. And it was at UBM, a med tech thing, and there was a whole list of illustrious speakers. You were batting cleanup at the end, and after everybody had all this glowing optimism about wearables and technology, you came up and in batting cleanup, you gave us a fresh breath of fresh air because you started to tell us about all this stuff isn't exactly measuring what we expect. And can you talk a little bit today about accuracy? Why is it important? What are we doing? Because if we're not getting the numbers right, we're not getting it right, period.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mentioned this before, the accuracy depends on the use case. It depends on what you're trying to do. And one of the fallacies, I guess, is that maybe you can have a bunch of crappy data and somehow the magical AI will fix it up. And we're not seeing that that's the case for at least most of the use cases we're seeing. And so one of the things that's really important is understanding what the use case is, making sure you have the accuracy good enough for that, and that also you know how to discount data that's bad so that you don't put that into your model when you're trying to assess a person and understand something about them that takes advantage of, say, the heart rate data, the RR interval data, and maybe the activity context.
Okay. Yeah, you have a great white paper on your site that I would encourage everybody to look at, accuracy in biometric wearables. It's really important that we start to get this right. The key thing, we've heard a lot in the media over the last year, the whole concept of fake news, and information coming from a lot of the wearables. We've had some failures this year, and some people are declaring the end of the wearables era. I think we're just beginning, and we're moving from me to we. So not only are we just measuring things for ourselves, our steps, our heart rate, our athletic measurements and things like that, but I think we're going to start to see the aggregation of data. And that's where it moves from the quantitative self to the quantitative health sort of crowdsourcing of information. Are you seeing work like this being pursued now? And
like I was saying earlier, I think the me to we has definitely been happening. What's needed is the me to we to me. What I mean is, people, now we have all this aggregated data, but I don't see companies effectively right now using that data then to say something important about you individually that is tailored towards you. And this is a problem. I mean, the whole dream in the beginning in wearable devices for health and fitness purposes was that people just living their everyday lives with things they already wear are generating this content that can be used uniquely for them to provide a positive outcome for them. And because we're not all the same, people, we're not a clockwork orange, we're not this robotic organism. What I'm not seeing is individualization that's making it where it's really just sticky for that individual and useful for that individual. So something that might say, for example, let's say a wearable device is tracking your sleep. What can it say uniquely about you, about your sleep and your fitness? You might be more sensitive to sleep. Your fitness may be more sensitive to sleep, or vice versa. Your sleep may be more sensitive to your fitness level than other people. What can that say about you that'll make an impact and improve either your sleep or fitness or both?
Correct. So we're collecting from the we part of the data aggregate sort of standards that we can go and measure individuals and find ourselves as either outliers. So that's going to become important. And I see a lot of this we stuff in the sense that clinical trials now are using data collected from a group of people rather than trying to get them to interface directly. It's always difficult to deal with clinical trials. You see Disney using wearables with the wristbands where they're collecting massive amounts of data, knowing where you are, what rides you want to go on, and tracking you. Coaches are tracking things now too. So as you start to do all this tracking and collection of data, and we get massive amounts of data, we start to edge into the world of AI and doing new data analytics. What's happening there, and what do you see really as sort of coming in the future in sort of that area?
The AI we see in our field right now is a couple things. One of them is, at the low level, is using AI to maybe make a traditional medical assessment. So for example, maybe using AI from the biometric data that's worn to understand what's going on in different chambers of the heart. And so in that case, it's very individualized. So you collect a bunch of data on people, and then you've got to really make it work on an individual basis from that. The other area is very, very different, and that's when you take a bunch of data, like you were talking about, and you might learn from that a trend, and then be able to tell someone individually from that trend from a bunch of different people where they fit on that trend. So you might say, okay, well, I've got a bunch of data from activity context and heart rate data and some other aspects depending on what the device is measuring. And then you might be able to tell somebody what activities they do during the day might affect their fitness level down the line, uniquely for them. So it's kind of like one is based off a lot of cloud data, the other one is based is lower level. It's more in the lab, collecting data in the lab.
Right.
So using the AI tools that are out there now, which have gotten really straightforward to use now.
But let's go back to the data itself again. What is a step? What is a heartbeat? You know, one device may be able to measure it and call a step a certain amount of measurement depending on the technology. And not only that, but I think in moving towards data aggregation, just simple combinations of multiple things. What does a step and a heart rate together mean? So this whole concept of data fusion of information.
You want it to come together right now.
Right now.
Got it. All right. So you know, so I don't know. Some of y'all in here might be on a part of or participate on the CTA's standardization board, but if you haven't, it's really interesting. A group of folks in disparate backgrounds in CTA have come together to put standards together for how accurate does the step rate need to be, and under what conditions do you need to really measure them right? Also heart rate. The step rate has been done now. The pedometry has been done. I think we're still finishing up. I don't think we've finished up the heart rate yet, but I believe that's the next thing we're pushing out. What can you really call a heart rate monitor? I tell you, you know, at Valence Cell, you know, we're a small company, so there's only so much we can do in this space and push things around, but I can't stand it when I see something called a heart rate monitor that isn't. You know, just because you got a light bulb and a photodiode and something doesn't make it a heart rate monitor. But the problem is, I'm not going to be taking that definition back. I mean, the marketplace has already called some of these, you know, mood rings heart rate monitors. So one of the things we've toured around at Valence Cell is what do you call something that's really, truly a heart rate monitor? That's a wearable device. And that's part of, you know, it's you know, I'm looking for names.
Speaking of mood rings, I picked one of these up.
Oh, yours is kind of
We
reddish.
were born, you know, with, that was our first wearables, I think.
Kicking it old school, yeah.
That, and then the Java ring, I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, as we start to take this data and begin aggregating it, we need standards. We need to put this together in a sort of full data structure. We're going to want to integrate it with our electronic health records. But nobody's defined that yet. What is the data structure for digital health?
Are any of the Validic guys in here right now? I'm curious. No? But I don't know if any of y'all worked with Validic. So, you know, Valence Cells in Raleigh, in Durham, right next to this, is a company called Validic that deals with this a lot. What they do is, you know, maybe there's an insurance company that wants to get wearables into their platform so they could use it to, you know, maybe give people discounts or whatever. And then you have wearable device companies that want to be connected there. And so one of the things, you know, that they've been dealing with is how do you make that normalized? And one of the challenges has been, say it's a blood pressure cuff, something that's straightforward. If you've ever used different blood pressure cuffs, you'll know that not all of them have the same accuracy. I mean, some of them kind of suck. And so the thing is, if you know, I do a reading on blood pressure X, monitor X, and send that to the cloud, as far as the cloud knows, that's the blood pressure. But if you have information about the integrity of that measurement or what the distribution of error is in that measurement, then that could help change things. So one of the things that's going on is trying to find ways to kind of normalize data from these disparate types of devices that all might have different accuracies and different profiles associated with them. Yeah,
I think it's got to come to be useful because everything isn't attached to me. I may have a scale that I weigh myself on. I may have just my personal health records. And to get one structure, to get a total picture of the digital health, I think becomes important. We have inhibitors to this world moving into the wearables 2.0 phase, if you want to call it that. Some of them is, you know, this hardware stuff. I heard a VC once say hardware is hard, and he's comparing it to software. And I believe that hardware is hard. Digital health hardware is harder. Validated, government, you know, blessed digital health is freaking impossible.
Well, in context of the regulatory environment.
Right.
So, you know, there's a few things about this. I've heard that this venture capitalist, you know, kind of coined this term, hardware is hard. I can't remember who said this. I wish I could give the guy credit right now, or girl. I can't remember who said this. But what they said was, hardware isn't necessarily harder than software. And if any of y'all have a software folks, I mean, there's a reason why Google pays people $500,000 a year to do software. It ain't easy. I mean, so I don't like, discounting the software.
Right.
But what they said was that, hardware isn't necessarily hard. Competing against Apple is hard. And I think that is actually better to say, because, I mean, it really, when you're a hardware company, there have been some failures in hardware companies, and you're going against Apple. I mean, Apple has a ton of lobbyists. I mean, they own a huge part of the government in terms of treasuries. They essentially, effectively, when you look at the American Invents Act, which they heavily lobbied, they own a large part of the PTO. So it's really hard, or the U.S. Patent Office, it's really hard to go up against those folks. And so if you're a hardware company, it's good to think about what you could do really well that prevents you from competing against a company like that.
Yeah. We got a few minutes left. Let's take a little bit of a look into the future. I think two areas that you see some of it on the floor here, different brain-computer interfaces, and we've had some discussion, earlier today on that. The European Union has invested, I think, $9 billion over the next 10 years on their brain project. U.S. and Obama put together a consortium for brain. I think it was a measly 100 million or something like that.
Pocket change.
Pocket change. But I think it's going to become important to have global sharing of the information, and not only that, but not just the brain-computer interface, but even really thinking of the brain in different ways. Unfortunately, we take our concept of a computer and try and mimic the brain to do something like a computer. What do you think is going to happen over the next 5 years realistically related to brain-computer interface?
I think it's going to be where the money's at, and I think of course, this is just my intuition. We work with so many different companies that are using sensors and using sensor fusion. We get to understand kind of where the market's going. My intuition is where the big money is going to be is in anticipation, for user interface purposes. So, like for example, if you're trying to use a wearable device to have more easy access to your mobile tablet or phone or whatever the case is, I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I hate doing this crap. I mean, I wish there were a better way to do that. And also at the same time, if I'm talking to my phone, it just kind of looks kind of weird. If I'm like, okay, move over here and do, So finding ways to anticipate what people want to do based off brain sensing, either directly or indirectly, is I think where the money's going to be at. I think there's going to be a lot of folks making a lot of loot off better ways to interface with the computer systems.
Yeah, user interface. Certainly, I think we've seen voice finally come of age, on the floor, everywhere you walk.
Yeah, I think now is the first time voice is actually making money. People are actually making money off it now, and so then there's more to come. But that's, I think, the really exciting part about the voice technology.
And it's part of the movement towards ubiquitous computer, making it easier so you don't have to type, you don't have to use any pointing devices, you don't even have to have a screen and touch it. You just say what you want.
Say what you want. Yeah.
You're in the right place here in Vegas.
That's right. Hey, I promise I won't say butthole again, though.
Okay. So. How about body area networks? I've heard that term, and I know there's some research work getting done up in Cambridge.
Are you talking in what now?
Body area on me.
Oh, body area networks?
Yes.
Yeah. So, at Valence, we're not seeing too much of that with our customers. So I got to say, I don't have a good feeling for where that's going. But I tell you one thing we do see on this side is folks who might want to use a sensor that isn't even as good, just because it's so much easier to get the data from it in a wireless system. They're willing to take mistakes as long as they know the mistakes, just because Bluetooth can be such, oh God, I'm sorry that, Bluetooth people over here, but if you're a Bluetooth person, there's a reason why you paid a lot, because Bluetooth really sucks. It's the bane of my existence.
Yes. I think we got to wrap up here, but what do we got? We have 5 minutes here? I brought one of my brain-computer interfaces here with me, and I'm just going to sort of take a second to put it on.
Oh my God, I think I'm hearing your thoughts.
But this may seem, and I think, the impression that many people, and if you've seen some of the booths and the demos and the brain-computer interface, it goes back to that sort of fake data thing. I don't think people believe this yet. But I know things are happening. University of Washington has actually created experiments and done brain-to-brain communication over the internet through devices, not connected, but through an interface.
Well, I think the challenge with the brain technology is not the science behind picking stuff up from the brain. I think that's been pretty well established.
Right.
The problem is making it really wearable. Wearable as in you could wear it throughout your everyday life, and in the electrode couplings to the brain, or rather the skin. That's where the big challenges still are.
Yeah. I love the last presentation that was talking about the fabrics, and I'm glad they mentioned the American Fabric Institute. I know Drexel University in Philly, where I'm from, has been doing a lot of research, and there's a whole consortium of companies, including MIT, and that research that's happening. They have a huge printing mill machine, and the things that they're doing, not just electronically, but in creating new fabrics and new things. And a good friend of mine, he's a robotics, finishing his PhD, has done a lot of stuff and research work into the wearables and the fabrics and things. But how things in the fabrics fit and work and wear and
I know a lot about that space because we have good relationships with North Carolina State, which has,
okay.
North Carolina State, arguably they have one of the most sophisticated advanced textiles programs in the world there, as far as not just the research, but trying to make it a reality.
Right.
And the thing with textiles is, the beauty of textiles is almost anything you can measure with the textile. The challenge is making it wearable for the use case. There's a big difference between making something that, say, a soldier might wear,
right,
versus making something that could be a true consumer product on a regular basis. And so that's where a lot of the research is going on now with textiles.
Yeah. I've seen in Philly, there was a group that was doing military work, and they created a wearable backpack that would generate energy from their steps and then be able to use it to charge their devices or do things like that. So I think we're really just entering sort of a useful phase beyond digital health in the wearable space. The new ways and new things will be discovered. And we won't just see the kids working around with the LED sneakers and things like that.
I'm just scared that one day my clothes are going to be smarter than I am.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. We've got 1 minute left. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the?
Oh, no. I don't know if there's any time for any questions if folks want to ask anything.
Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, one or two.
Oh.
Well, his brain thing's still going off, actually.
Yeah. It doesn't need my brain, huh?
Thank you. Do you see any significant expansion in the types of data that you can gather from wearables, whether textile or more like wristbands now, for example, gathering data from sweat, or I don't even know what it might be, skin conductivity?
So, there's a couple things there. One of them is in traditional wearables, and what extra things we see coming out of those, so those that aren't fabric oriented. And then also data collected from, like for example, sweat and other body fluids. And on the wearable side, on say the non-fabric side, where you're say using optomechanics, light, or measuring electricity from the body one way or the other. In that case, what we're seeing more of is folks opening up advanced features. We've actually done this ourselves, where you can get not only the heart rate, but you can get the PPG intensity. You can get information about the time resolution between the peaks. You can get information about the way that information about how the peaks are changing, the slopes of the peaks, and this type of thing. And that's useful because that's something that a machine learning algorithm can scale. So it can scale to other devices because you're telling the machine the same data for every device with these nuances rather than just taking the waves and figuring it out on itself. Then on the side of capturing the fluids, Valence Cell, we don't do that directly, but we have collaborators who are. And what's interesting about those devices, what I really like about those devices are those that are worn temporarily, because the only problem, in traditional wearables, you wear them and you don't have to kind of replenish anything. In those technologies, you do. And that's not bad, because if it's a patch, for example, which is a real popular use case, one we're seeing actually more of our stuff going into, they're meant to be disposable. So you can pull that information and really get some useful things out of it.
I think there may be a shift too. We've had all our measurements from majority coming from watches and from the wrist, which is a good place, but the ear apparently is the best place to take biometric data from the human body.
You're going to make me say it, aren't you, Frank?
No, go ahead.
The rear is a little bit better, but the ear is a lot easier for consumers. And so, I mean, there's more that you can get out of the ear. There's a tympanic temperature. If you can access the tympanic membrane, it's thin. You can see what's going on in there optically, which you can't really do through the skin.
Right.
Also, the motion artifacts are less. The physiology of the ear is unique, where you have these arterioles that blow up and amplify the pressure waves, so we can measure blood pressure at the ear optically. We can't do it nearly that well on the wrist. So it's really is a magical place. We see a lot of innovation going on there, not just with us, but our partners in industry who kind of use our stuff in interesting ways.
Other questions?
No, that's
it.
I'm afraid
Thanks
we
for your
are
time.
out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen.